Hello there, Dragonfire here, and I am finally wrapping up a series that I started quite a while ago, and that was I have reviewed all of the Nightmare on Elm Street films, so now it is time for a ranking. Alright, a ranking. Okay, so there are currently 9 movies in the franchise, and for my number 9, I am kicking off with a very controversial choice, I'm sure, and that is I'm putting Wes Craven's New Nightmare as my number 9, my least favorite of the series. Now, I went back and forth between a few ones that are towards the bottom of my list, but the reason this ultimately gets my number 9 is I have never watched this movie while not almost falling asleep watching it, even the very first time. There is something about Wes Craven's New Nightmare that I just find boring. I know a lot of people really love the Heather Camp trilogy that you get with the original, followed by Dream Warriors from Part 3, and then New Nightmare, where you get Heather Camp returning for the third time. So it's like a trilogy for that actress in the series. But I've never enjoyed New Nightmare. Um, I think the idea of doing the whole meta thing was kind of cool. Ultimately, even though this is not supposed to actually be Freddy Krueger and supposed to be some sort of supernatural being like a demon or something impersonating Freddy Krueger, this ultimately falls very, very flat for me. And like I said, I just find it boring and I can hardly stay awake while trying to watch the movie. Maybe it's when I'm marathoning through the movie at this point, I just feel like I've seen enough, if I've watched them all in a row. But I think even trying to remember my first time ever seeing the movie, even that, I think uh, I just never found the movie very interesting. So that's why it gets my last place. Okay, coming in at number 10 for me is going to be the 2010 remake. Okay, this is the only one that I have that's not part of the big box set. Um, the the remake, I get what they were trying to do with it. I think that they were really trying very hard to take any of the campier and over the top and comedic elements that the series did do later on, and they tried to mostly um, get rid of that here, and they were trying to return Freddy to being scary again. That was the intent, I'm pretty sure. But that being said, I don't really feel that it succeeds in that. You know, maybe people who've never seen the original series would find this version of Freddy scary, but I just feel like there's just too much baggage that the character brings along with it that you just can't reinvent the character ever again. I think Jackie or Haley did as good a job as anybody could have, but Freddy Krueger, in my opinion, will always be Robert Englund. So ultimately, I just don't enjoy this movie that much. Okay, now, since I got the remake out of the way, returning to. Oh, I got New Nightmare and both the remake out of the way, so going to the original series. Uh, my number 7 is going to be Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare, which is the 6th movie in the franchise. Um, I feel like some of this humor does kind of work for me in a so bad it's good kind of way. that I can actually laugh at the humor of this movie. I know that there are a lot of people out there who absolutely hate this version of Freddy Krueger, and this is the most extreme example of jokey Freddy, and it just goes too over the top, and he becomes more of a cartoon character, and that that this was the movie that went too far for most people. This is definitely the most extreme version of Freddy Krueger being cartoon-esque. But this is also a franchise that where you're haunted in your dreams, and if you die in your dream, you die in real life. And the whole point of Freddy Krueger is that he comes after people when they're sleeping, and it's that he's interacting with their minds, with their conscious, subconscious, unconscious minds, whatever it is, um, in such a way in that anything can happen in the dream world, and we see that right from the very first movie in the entire franchise. Um, that that the dream world is in fact the dream world, and for anyone who's ever had really weird dreams, myself included, yeah, anything can happen in the dream world, and so it's not surprising that they just go over the top and just crazy with it. They just, um, to me, it's not that surprising. And, you know, and they did dial it back with the movies that would come after this, New Nightmare and Freddy vs. Jason, to dial back and make Freddy not as comedic as he was. Freddy's Dead was the peak of comedic Freddy, but um, um, you get a mixture of scary Freddy and comedic Freddy and all this kind of stuff. You get a mixture throughout the franchise, but definitely Freddy's Dead is the one that takes the comedic side the farthest. But again, for me, the reason I have it ranked higher than some of the other entries on this list is because there's just this element to it where I kind of can laugh at it in a so bad it's good kind of way. I do find some of the humor rather, whatever the intention of the filmmakers was, some of it does work for me on some level that I can kind of laugh at the movie, and it's kind of fun for me. Alright, next up I'm probably going to have to go with number 2, and that is Freddie's Revenge. I think there's a reason why horror movies tend to rely on final girls and not final guys. It just makes the dynamic better. I'm not sure why exactly it is that, I'll show you that cover as well without the cardboard case. But I'm not sure exactly why it is that uh, this movie introduces a new concept and they never go back to it in any of the sequels. I think they need to keep Freddy confined. They never really revisit Freddy coming out into the real world, basically kind of inhabiting Jesse's body and then coming out into the real world, which they introduced in part 2, something that he hadn't done in part 1, and they never really go back to that. I mean, I guess you could say that he sort of does the same thing to, I forget the guy's name now, but the stoner kid from Freddy versus Jason. Freddy inhabits his body in order to drug, in order to get rid of the sleeping pills and and to drug Jason to knock him out so that Freddy can start killing people in the dream world again. That Jason won't be taking his kills, and of course the characters in that movie end up using the fact that Jason is knocked out to their advantage to pull Freddy out of the dream world, and then have Jason and Freddy fight each other. But um, the I guess maybe there's just certain people who he can inhabit their bodies. Certain people are more susceptible, perhaps because of certain elements or something. But it just seems weird that Freddy actually seemed fairly successful in killing a lot of people in part two, and for him to never use that tactic again. Now, I suppose that's not, you can't really hold that against part two, in the sense that when they were making part two and when the film came out, we didn't know that none of the sequels to follow was ever going to use that tactic again. So it's not really the fault of part two that Freddy gained a new power and it was never seen again. It's just that the sequels decided not to do that, so it kind of makes part two an outlier. But yeah, I think it's better to keep Freddy confined, because then you have the place where you fight Freddy, and that's in your dreams. So the goal is to stay awake, and I just think that that's a better way to go with the series. And to have Freddy just come into the real world doesn't seem all that a good direction to take the series as a whole. So if they were ever thinking that there might be a sequel, then I guess you can kind of blame that on the people who made part two. But anyway, yeah, overall it just doesn't work as much for me. It's a fine sequel. I don't hate it or anything, but it's it just doesn't work for me on a lot of levels. All right, now moving up. This one probably has moved up quite a bit for me, and with number 5, I'm going. My number 5 is part 5, and that is the Dream Child. Part 5, the Dream Child. So 9 was Wes Craven'S New Nightmare, which is out of continuity with the rest of the series, as is the 2010 remake, which got my number 8. My number 7 was Freddy's Dead, which was part 6. My number 6 was part 2, Freddie's Revenge. And so now we're on my number 5, Dream Child. Number 5 landed on number 5. Yeah, I actually enjoyed this movie more on the latest rewatch than I did previously. I do like the angle of Freddy coming into the dream. Um, of the unborn child is still in the womb, and then that's affecting the mother as well. And you have this young girl who's pregnant, and her boyfriend and everything, and she's fighting not only for her own survival but for that of the kid. Of course, Freddy really doesn't want to kill the child inside her, because he wants to somehow be reborn through the child or something like that. He's got some sort of convoluted thing going on with how he plans to use Jacob in the future, I think. But maybe he plans to turn him into a little evil serial killer as well, or whatever it is. But I like the idea of him coming for the unborn child, and it just adds an interesting, different element and all this stuff back. Now, the stuff, how it's paralleled with the main character and her child and Freddy's mother. I mean, Freddy's mother was introduced in part 3, and has this presence in part 3 and 4 that she is a ghost. But they bring it around. The whole finding Freddy's mother's body that was left and was never found, never buried, um, kind of contradicts is it part 3 or part 4? I think they see her grave, but I suppose I think they might be a line in this movie. They might say, "Well, it's just an empty grave" or something. I don't know. But anyway, uh, so yeah, I mean that part is kind of convoluted. It feels like that they were trying to do, in a way, they're a new version of when they buried Freddy's remains in part 3. That they were trying to do it over again. So yeah, part 5 definitely has its problems, but like I said, I did enjoy it on this latest rewatch. Um, in some ways more than I had in the past. So that's affecting my ranking. I don't know what it was about it that just struck a chord with me, but it did. Okay, now for my top 4, my Mount Rushmore. Let's go with um, the Dream Master. The Dream Master is a follow up to Dream Warriors, and it comes perhaps the closest to catching the vibe that Dream Warriors has in some ways. Um, I am disappointed that that they kill off the surviving characters, most of the surviving characters from the previous movie right at the beginning of this one. It really seems dumb. Why couldn't they just continue the story with the old characters? They could still introduce new characters and kill them off. You could have a a suspense thing with the new characters and the old characters dying, and but it's right at the very beginning that in Dream Master that they just say, boom, boom, we're gonna kill off the survivors um, of the previous movie and just make it about these new characters and everything. And it just I don't like it. I don't like it when they do that. But of course, it's something I've talked before about in my reviews, how horror movies have a tendency to do this, and many franchises have done it. Yeah, but Nightmare on Elm Street might just be the franchise. They weren't the first franchise to do it. That would be Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th Part 2, as far as I can tell, was the first franchise to do it. Um, but they're probably the most egregious offenders, and um, Part 4 is an example of this. Alright, now this is going to be really controversial. My number 3, I'm going to go with the original 1984 film. I know people are going to be really mad at me for ranking this relatively low, but hey, it gets my bronze medal. One thing that holds it back for me is the ending. Let's face it, that is a really stupid, convoluted ending that was only done, I guess, to make the sequels seem more plausible. But they sort of still, in every sequel, kind of try to explain how Freddy Krueger comes back anyway, so, like, they don't need that Freddy's still alive at the end of the sequel. They could have done it much more subtly. They could have done a much more subtle hint that Freddy was still alive. But it's a thing I've talked about before with horror movies, the whole two ending thing. And in the Friday the 13th franchise, we see it a couple times, especially with the remake. But this franchise definitely is known for the two ending thing, where you have the character defeat the bad guy, and that's ending number 1, and then ending number 2 shows you that the bad guy is actually still around and hasn't been defeated. And this is, I feel like, one of the worst examples of that we get with the ending of the original Nightmare on Elm Street from 1984, because it literally does the way she defeats him. It's not that he's just still around and that he's gonna come back and return for a sequel. It undoes the way she defeats him. Um, she defeats him by turning her back on him and saying he's not real, and that she takes back the power and that she's no longer afraid of him. And I guess that the undoing of that Freddy Krueger still had some power over her or something does, I guess, make it more plausible to give us a franchise and for Freddy to come back for all of the sequels, but it's really weird, and I just don't like the um, kind of the way she defeats him doesn't matter because he comes back so immediately and so aggressively. But the ending aside, this is a good movie. I really enjoy it. The 1984 original is the one that introduced the character, and it showed us, it gave us a glimpse to what it would be like if a killer was stalking you in your dreams, and nobody being really sure what the rules are because it is the dream world, and he likes to play with his victims and he toys with them. Freddy Krueger has a personality. He's not just this big, strong, silent killer like a Michael Myers or a Jason Voorhees or what we've seen from other movies and franchises. He's this killer with this personality, and he's gonna talk to you, and he's gonna torture you, and he's gonna play with his victims, cat and mouse games. And yeah, I really enjoyed this, and what an innovative thing to do, because because he comes after you in the dream world, people don't even believe that he's real, and it's this whole dynamic of you're never safe because all you want to do is go to sleep. But that's right where he's waiting for you. You're so tired, but you can't sleep, and so it's like um, a really cool concept, very innovative. So this was the one to introduce the concept. So I thought great job by Wes Craven, but there's just a couple of films that I enjoy more than I enjoy this one. It just comes down to what I enjoy. So, all right, my number two is going to be Freddy versus Jason. I love this movie. I love seeing Freddy and Jason fight each other. I'm a sucker for it, and I think it's great. I mean, we waited until what Freddy vs. Jason came out in 2003 or 2004, something like that. And it is a movie where um, the uh, you finally get to see it, and I do think that it delivers. It delivers on watching Freddy and Jason fight each other, and that's what you want to see. They get to fight in the dream world first, then they get to fight in the real world, and they both go head to head, and all that, and you have the characters that are setting up those fights, because Freddy's goal is to kill more people, and Jason's sent on a mission for Freddy to get Freddy back. The whole way it's all set up, I think, is actually done really well to get these two characters together and then eventually have them fight each other. I think it's all done very well. Are the characters the greatest in the movie Freddy vs. Jason? No, but it's just a really fun movie, and you finally get to see these two iconic characters go toe to toe, and I enjoyed that a lot. Yeah, I mean, Jason, if you count the dream sequence at the end of part one, has been around since 1980. Freddy has been around since 1984. Those when those two movies were released, and that hype throughout, you know, all of that. I mean, I saw an interview with Robert Englund who said that people approached him as early as 1984, like right after the first film came out. People already said, "Oh, what if like Freddy Krueger fought Jason Voorhees, and stuff like that." So it had been a long time coming, and it finally happens, like 2 decades later. But hey, at least it was still Robert Englund playing Freddy. Kind of disappointed that it wasn't Kane Hodder playing Jason. Who had played him in the four previous movies. So he had kind of become the definitive Jason by that point, but that's still pretty fun movie. And my number one, to me, the definitive version of Freddy Krueger, and the part that makes the most sense. Yeah, every movie they try to kill him off, and every movie, he keeps coming back for a sequel. But to me, if there was going to be any definitive death of Jason, it was probably in Dream Warriors. Dream Warriors is my gold medal. It's my number one. Um, that should have been the death of the character. The way they got rid of him in Dream Warriors was the best of any Freddy death in the series. Of course, they do the double ending thing, and there is a small indication at the end of the movie that Freddy might not actually be dead. But all that second ending aside, I really enjoy the movie. To me, that second ending is subtle enough that it doesn't ruin the experience of the movie for me. Plus, by that point, it's like, they're going to make a sequel anyway, so you don't, it's not quite as damaging as I think the second ending is for part one. That's my opinion. It's real subtly done. Not quite as subtly as in part four, but still, I think it's 4 or 5. I know, one of them, no, 4, I think 4 is the one that has the most subtle second ending, the little indication that Freddy might still be alive. It's almost a blink and you'll miss it type of thing. It's a lot more, it's less subtle, I think, in the other entries. Definitely, the first one handles that the worst, letting you know that Freddy is still alive. The second one I'll give a free pass to because it basically kind of does the same thing that the first one did. So it's only kind of recopying the ending of the first. So I think the first one handles that the worst, and the ending is something that definitely dinks the first one in my opinion. But the Dream Warriors is still a really, really good movie. Um, uh, yeah, it just is. It is a good movie, and um, to me, I love it when the protagonist, well, in some cases, the final girl fights back. In this Dream Warriors, it's more of a group of finalists, and even though some of them end up dying, they're all teaming up beforehand. They're gonna fight Freddy together, and I think that's really cool. I really enjoy that aspect. I really love it when the protagonists get fight the villain, when they decide to stand up for themselves and fight back. Those are a lot of times my favorite entries in any of these horror movie franchises, is when the protagonists are actually actively fighting the villain instead of just running scared all the time. And I like seeing them succeed, which is what happens in Dream Warriors. They succeed in fighting off Freddy. So that's just one of the reasons why Dream Warriors is my favorite. I love the characters. I just think that the whole story works together really, really well, and it's really fun. Okay, so just a quick recap. Wes Craven'S New Nightmare gets my number 9. My number 8 goes to the 2010 remake. Freddy's Dead, which is part 6, gets my number 7. Freddie's Revenge, which is part 2, gets my number 6. My number 5 goes to The Dream Child, which is part 5. Part For the Dream Master also lands number 4 on my list, kicking off my Mount Rushmore. My bronze medal for third place goes to the original 1984. And my silver medal second place goes to Freddy vs. Jason because I love seeing those two guys fight each other. But finally, my gold medal goes to Dream Warriors Part 3. Okay, so that is my list. That is my ranking. Please leave your ranking down below in the comments section. Everybody like, share, and subscribe. God bless everybody. Dragonfire out.